Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. It's Wednesday and a whole new lineup here, other than yourself, Patrick, with myself and Lawrence Connolly. A wee shuffle of the pack. Is there going to be much shuffling tonight? Lawrence Connolly, what do you think?
We better get settled centre-half pairing before the chance to win an world record, 8th treble. That's a world record. That is a world record. Sometimes you get world records.
No, I made up one.
In Scotland that aren't. So I wasn't impressed with Awat at centre-half. I'd rather see, go back to Colby and Starfelt, see what he can do. Colby's at fault for the 2 goals at Ibrox, but I don't think we should write him off just yet. No. Whether it's the atmosphere for the first one, bit of rustiness, the second one, he just needs to be stronger. So I'd maybe go back with those 2 at centre-half, 2 at left-back, and Alistair Johnston's back in training. How close is he? How close is he? So, yeah, I think it's all about getting a settled defence just now. We've got a chance to win an 8th treble, another one for the trophy cabinet. I see this week, last week, cabinet makers in Glasgow were puzzled by being asked to make a cabinet for bragging rights. This week, the Poundland aficionados have asked them to make a trophy cabinet for toe-to-toe.
The toe-to-toe cup?
Yeah.
Is that like the Inter-Toto Cup? Is that similar?
Yeah. I think it sits alongside the Beale League.
All right, aye. The Kenny Miller Cup. It's honestly it's absolutely an impressive haul that they are managing to attain. We are going to be talking about tonight's game, of course. Ange touched on the central defensive pairing. He touched on the rotation of some players. He also touched on the fact that what he does know is that we are champions, and that is why there is the tagline. Patrick, I'm going to come to yourself first. Now, the way I kind of operate, the way I view media is that, people try and separate media into mainstream, into alternative, rebel media, fan media, whatever you want to call it. And it's existed for a long, long time. You think way back to the old fanzine days, very, very influential publications, particularly at clubs like Celtic, whereby, whole fan movements, the roots of them were in, fan media back then, which was the old paper photocopied fanzines, like Not the View, for example, once a Celt, always a Celt. And what you got from that was a way and a vehicle of sharing information, albeit on a monthly basis, Patrick, for all the kids out there. You had to wait for a month for your updates. But for example, our friend Jim Orr was instrumental in Celts, Save Our Celts, which was a precursor to Celts for Change, and we know that the street movement was a massive reason why the club was eventually saved and taken over. So I don't like to look at separating media other than saying, right, you've got bad media and good media. So I'm not going to sit here and slag off the mainstream, and just tar everybody with the same brush, because what we've got here at Acsom is we've got people like yourself, Declan, Amy, people like James, who are all aspiring within that field. I'm not going to criticise that entire profession in one fell swoop. What I would always say is there's good and there's bad. So I've seen really, really good mainstream and alternative media and really, really bad within both groups. But I'll tell you something, that was painful to watch that press conference with Ange yesterday. It was painful to watch. I mean, the first 2 questions were exactly the same question. And you can see Ange, he's rolling his eyes. I mean, he's sitting there thinking to himself, why am I getting asked about Rangers? Why am I getting asked about Rangers' challenge next season? I'm on the cusp of history, as Lawrence has just said. What did you make of all that?
Yeah, I think I only got about 2/3 of the way through it, and I thought, God, I don't know how much more of this I can take. And luckily, there was like fan media intertwined with, poor question by, both, mainstream and sort of independent journalists. And as you said, I was listening at the first 5 minutes, and I thought, they've asked the same question twice. It's a different person asking the same question.
Yep.
And, they're asking about Rangers signings and who Rangers have let go and who Rangers might sign and how Rangers are going to do come August and September. And you think to yourself, we've got Trophy Day, we've got Hibs tonight, we've got Trophy Day on Saturday, we've got a cup final, a national cup final the following Saturday, and then you get 2 months of summer and you're asking about Rangers. And you think, oh, come on. And how many times does he need to bat it away as well? Because he was asked, I think he was asked about Beale's appointment back in November, and he goes, and a list of things top of my mind at the minute that ranks below what I'm having for dinner tonight. And you think when he's batting it away so easily, he's been doing it for 2 years, and they still persist with these questions that he doesn't care about. He's not going to answer them, and press conferences. Sir Alex Ferguson credits Jockstein with inventing press conferences, and I think Jockstein regretted it because how much he hated it. And Ange doesn't seem a big fan either. And it's good, it gives people like us, people like Acsom, other fan media, a chance to ask questions about player contracts or how the team's set up, injuries, and you can get these updates if you're asking quality questions. But to be asked these sort of when papers want to run with a narrative or certain outlets want to run with some sort of narrative and you can get a comment to attach to it, he's just not going to entertain that sort of stuff. And the fact that it happens twice a week, everyone's just bored of it. And it does become quite painful to watch.
Yeah, and again, I totally underline and point out once again, I'm not saying that mainstream media are all guff. Absolutely not. I'm not a journalist. The job they do is extremely difficult. They've trained for it over a period of time, and many of the people asking the questions are very experienced. And we're friendly with quite a lot of journalists, who I rate really, really highly as writers and broadcast journalists. And I would hope that more and more people like Amy come through the Acsom ranks and go on to bigger things elsewhere. However, Lawrence, when you go into a press conference, and you might have a list of some questions on your page. If, for example, you were second up and somebody's already asked your question, you certainly don't ask the same one. You think on your feet, or you might have a few backup questions to ask Ange, and you wouldn't focus on Rangers. We're going into a week where, as Patrick says, we're going to be lifting the league trophy at the weekend. The following weekend, we're going for a historic treble. Why are you asking about Rangers?
I'll tell you why. There's a couple of reasons. One, they know that Ange certainly has the measure of them, and kind of what he says will probably turn out to be true. And the media, large parts, are in denial. We didn't get much credit for 4 trebles in a row. We're on for an 8th treble world record. They're not going to give us record or give us credit where it's due. And they have to deflect because they're hurting. They don't want to admit it. For them, it is all about Safeco. What do you think you can do? Well, not a lot. The skint of players are leaving, mate. But back to us, we're going to hopefully win an 8th treble and improve for Europe next season. But as for it, asking the same question, you think they'd do some research. So what Ange's making has been look pretty foolish for 2 years now. Don't want to look so foolish. Maybe I'll research 5 questions, 6 questions in case mine gets asked. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll ask something different. Because any time anyone asks them about Rangers, they end up looking a fool. Maybe I don't want to do that. But they don't seem to be learning.
No, they don't, Lawrence. And I'll tell you something that Ange does, and that is that he's and I've said this from day one, he's a quick learner. So when mistakes are made, he learns from those mistakes. And I think that, there's been a wee wobble. That's all it is over the last few weeks. There's been a wee wobble with this team. And I'm really delighted, actually, that we've got another game tonight. It's coming thick and fast. Get it out the system. We'll run through the areas of the team, Patrick, with a view to tonight's game also, to the cup final in a week and a half's time as well, because he did pinpoint a few wee things that I thought were really interesting. Everybody talks about how do you maintain the intensity, how do you maintain momentum, and I think he's answered that question a couple of dozen times this season. You get to your work every single day, you approach it the same way, you make sure you're focused and prepared for every single challenge. Rather than saying we take every game as it comes, he breaks it down for everybody. And by the way, he had the guns out yesterday as well, Patrick. I was pretty impressed with Ange's guns. I mean, you've got him and John Kennedy to contend with. I wouldn't be asking him daft questions, that's for sure. But let's start off with the centre halves, because Lawrence did focus on them at the top of the show. And we're in a situation where Carter Vickers had been managing, or Celtic had been managing his injury. And at the very first opportunity, he sent away for surgery, which is great. And hopefully we'll get him back in time for Champions League football next season. Couple of things. Firstly, and I don't think we had to be shown this over a period of 2 or 3 games, Carter Vickers is an absolute rock in the Celtic side, not just the defence, because as soon as the defence looks vulnerable, I think it affects the rest of the team. But also, we've tried 2 different partnerships since Carter Vickers went under the knife, Patrick. Kobayashi and Starfelt and Iwata. And Ange was asked the question, and he came out with what we've been talking about all week. He wanted to try Iwata out, just in case there's a situation on the eve of a cup final where somebody pulls a muscle. And by the way, it might be Starfelt. So tonight, you might actually see him trying Iwata and Kobayashi, so that every possible partnership at centre-half have played together, so that when we go into that game against Inverness Cali, he's not thinking, these guys don't know how to play together. And he explained that. He didn't suggest that he might drop Starfelt, but he's definitely using these games to see the partnerships that he might have to be using come cup final day.
Yeah, for sure. And he said that. He said as much as that yesterday. Obviously, we'd like to think Starfelt will be starting the cup final if he's fit. But as you say, he could pick up an injury tonight or on Saturday. Hopefully, that doesn't happen. Touch wood. But as you say, he's trying out different options. Kobayashi played at Tynecastle and at Ibrox. I think Kobayashi looks quite good until those 2 games. I thought he looked a bit shaky at Tynecastle. I thought Celtic looked a bit shaky for the first half hour, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously at Ibrox, a bit of a disaster of a game, for the whole team. But and then anyone who knows me knows I'm not a fan of playing players out of position. We've had McGregor at left back in umpteen different occasions, and it never tends to work. We were forced into all sorts of changes when Ange first came in. You had Uegide playing centre half, and I think I remember Armstrong being moved to right back against Mulder under Ronnie Dylan and all this. So I'm not a fan at all. So I didn't like that when I seen the team line up, and then him and Ralston get into a bit of a muddle for the first goal against St Mirren. And in both games, I've got a bit of sympathy because you're losing an early goal within 5 minutes, and it can hit your confidence and sort of it rocks your game plan a bit. So I have sympathy for both him and Kobayashi for that, but I wouldn't say either of them have passed the test the last 2 games. So for all we know, I might see Stephen Welsh tonight if he's fit, and it'll be interesting to see how he gets on, because I thought in August he sort of hit the ground running. I thought maybe he could challenge for a place, and then had a few bad games in Europe, I think, and just totally bombed out the squad ever since then. So it really is, the jersey's there to be played for, sort of play your way into the team for that other centre half spot, because without Carter Vickers, it really is. I think there's a bit of a gap, a bit of a gulf in the squad between the starting 2 and just about any other option.
Listen, that's one of the things all season we've been talking about, Patrick, and we've said that you've got to kind of aim to have 2 players in every position, and maybe until recently, I felt that we probably did in many of the positions, and then the backup, if you like, the second stringer is asked to step up, and it's not kind of looked as fluid. I don't think our tempo's been there either, and I think that when you look at the potential for, let's say, Iwata, I think because of Andy's words, if that was to come up, we know the reasons why. It's not because he's dropping Starfelt. It's simply because he wants to make sure there's an understanding between all the partnerships come deadline day, come D-Day, Scottish Cup final day. And Liam Carrigan was talking yesterday. I'm a bit like Patrick. I don't like seeing players out of position. However, what Liam was saying is that, it's within, the very roots of Japanese football where players are taught to play in a number of positions. So you've got Maeda, doesn't matter if it's left, right or centre, literally he will play anywhere up top. You've had Hatate playing fullback before he came to Celtic. And that's the way that they like to build their players, so that, they might have a favoured position, Lawrence, but if they need to play centre-half, then they can. I had my concerns, as well as trying out Iwata in case there's any injuries for the cup final. I also felt, like Patrick says there, that Kobayashi wasn't at his best against Hearts or indeed Rangers. And maybe the worst thing that could have happened is for him to be bullied by Curtis Main. So it would have been 3 games on the bounce that he's maybe not played so well. So you put Iwata in, although he doesn't have the height, he's got the physical presence, doesn't he? And again, even he struggled against Curtis Main. How do you see it going tonight? Because obviously we're going to focus on the Hibs game. So how do you see the centre-half partnership tonight? Do you think we go with safety with Starfelt, or do we try the other one, Kobayashi and Iwata?
I would go with Kobayashi and Starfelt. we don't have many games left before the cup final. I get what we're saying there could be an injury. Well, there could be an injury at any point, and where does it leave you? So he's tried a lot out. I don't think he looked anywhere near as comfortable as Kobayashi looks. And if you're saying 3 games in a row could have got Kobayashi's confidence down, what's it going to do? When he knows he's supposed third choice centre half, and if he doesn't play 2 games in a row. So yeah, I would put him in tonight. We want to try and get them settled and get before the cup final. He's seen Awata there. Maybe if we get 2 or 3 up, make the change, push Awata on and get Kobayashi off. But yeah, I'd start with Kobayashi and Starfelt.
Excellent. We obviously know that they're tuning into Acsom right now before they pick that team, Lawrence. That's why we're running through it. Jungle Lion.
Declan's sitting with Ange in the West End at the moment.
Declan?
Yes.
Is having a wee mock-up.
Coffee, mate. And,
yeah, absolutely. Oh, I know. I don't know who's stalking who. Jungle Lion, you're in. Quick, off the mark. You're on the YouTube channel. Anyone who is watching on YouTube, do us a favour and subscribe. And also, give us a big thumbs up. Because normally we're 600, 700, 800 deep live on the live streams, and the big thumbs up always help us. But there's another thing we're going to say, and we'll probably put something on the blog over the next couple of days. I think the 25th of May would be a good day to do it. We released a single in December. There is only one member of the Acsom team who appears in the promotional video, Patrick, and he is on this stream, and it's not me. But the Wakes teamed up with Acsom and Carly Connor, and we recorded a single called The Glory and the Dream, which is all about the heritage and the foundations of our magnificent football club. And we took a walk, didn't we, that morning, Lawrence? In fact, it was in the morning. When did we meet? Was it 5:45 in the morning or something? 5:45?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
And we took a trip from, it was very early, you were the only one that made it, a trip from Celtic Park all the way down to St Mary's and everywhere in between. Well, that video now is... let me just check, 24,953 views, which is quite astonishing, right? So what I would love to do is for that to get 25,000 views by the 25th of May. It would be only fitting. And with these things, I'm not in the music business, Lon, so I don't know how to release a single, but we did it anyway, right? And we did it through a company called Ditto. And what happens is you get paid a quarterly royalty check. Doesn't happen physically these days, but it still sounds good to say it's a royalty check. And every single penny that comes in is being donated to St Mary's. We've already raised over the 2 fundraisers in the region of 34, 35 grand. So what we'll do is we'll give all the figures and everything. We'll put it all in a blog and let you know how that's worked. And it was, as well as that, it's a fantastic tune. It was written by Gary John Kane of the Proclaimers. That's who gave us that lovely tea towel of Sunshine on Leaf. We're playing Hibs tonight. And also JJ Gilmore of the Silencers, Lawn. So you played a part in the video, and everybody who tunes in or watches that video or downloads the song plays a part in raising cash for the birthplace of Celtic.
Yeah, absolutely great. And I know Thomas, or Canon Thomas, he's known these days, is grateful for every penny, to help the parish. But, it's not the most well-off area. So, yeah, he's very grateful of any help he gets. Interesting, the Scottish Catholic Museum will be relocating there as well. It was at a talk by Dr. Michael Conley that wrote the book Walfred, and Paul McQuaid of the Shamrock. They gave a talk in the Calton about Michael Davitt and Brother Walfred, and just highlighting, that area and what was going on at the time when the club was being founded, the importance of St Mary's to Celtic and its existence.
Absolutely. And it's great every so often, like the Mass for Angorton War, Lawrence, it took place before the game on Saturday, constantly reminding us of the importance of St Mary's. And the money that's been raised by Acsom listeners is just absolutely stunning. And in association with the penalty spot, the next fundraiser is going to be an online auction. And the penalty spot have provided us with a number of auction items that we're going to be selling over the next 10 days or so, and that's going to take in Trophy Day in the Scottish Cup final. So hopefully it's a good time to raise a few other quid, and you might get a really nice signed item, because the stuff they do down in Saw Street is quite phenomenal. I'm pretty sure Lawrence Conley will agree with that, because you're never out of the place. Jungle Lion.
But not just in Sword Street. I mean, on Saturday we're going to be down at the Peter Scarf for Trophy Day, and we'll be there's an evening on there. So Kevin and his memorabilia will be there Saturday night.
Remind me, is that Coatbridge?
It's Linwood, mate. It's
Linwood.
St James's or St Monica's, or St Bartholomew was up Coatbridge, but no. Peter Scarf, obviously named after one of Linwood's most famous sons. Great club in Linwood. So if you haven't been to the Peter Scarf, get along for an away game that you don't get tickets for, or even a home game you don't get tickets for. Highly recommend it, for a day out at the Scarf.
You get about, Lawrence, I'll tell you something. Jungle Lion, thanks for joining the show. I'll get to you eventually, my friend. And a great dig at them as well. We're talking about Ange yesterday with nothing to play for the rest of the season. Did you catch that, Patrick, where he's talking about every team in the league bar Celtic and Rangers? I've got something to play for. It's just the way he does it. It's so subtle.
I think it was 5 or 6 minutes in, and I think it was about the third question or something. He didn't lose it, but he was clearly getting fed up, and he was saying, what can I change? We come in, we do the analysis, we recover, we talk about training, talk about the game, prepare the way that we always prepare, and one thing I do know is that we are champions, and we've done our job, and we can't wave a magic wand and pretend to the players that we're not champions. They know that the league is all wrapped up, and we've got nothing to play for. And obviously, in another answer, he goes, "Yeah, Hibs will be interesting because us and Rangers have got nothing to play for." And he's quite good at getting those digs in. He's quite clever. He likes to take his time with his answers, so quite good from the big man. And hopefully we can make it as Lawrence says, a really special season, our 8th treble, a world record. It's just phenomenal when you think back, only 7 years ago when it was sort of Rogers came in, and it felt as if the club was on a bit of a low point, even though our rivals were coming up from the lower leagues as a new entity. It felt like a bit of a downer because we'd been beaten in cup competitions, Europe, and we went this magnificent run, 4 trebles in a row, and we thought, right, that was unbelievable, once in a lifetime, never be done again. And here we are, we're one game away from it against a lower league side, who personally I think we need to get revenge over for April 2015. I think we should dedicate this treble to Ronnie because he was cheated out of one in his first season. That's my view anyway. And I think it's payback time. I think that's an extra incentive for the players. It'll only be McGregor and Forrest that remember that, but I'm doubly excited to win the game if we do win the game, because it'll be a special day.
It definitely will be. And you're talking about the preparation where you go into a dressing room or you go to the training ground and everybody knows that you're the champions. And John Clements comes in to talk about that as well. Yes, it is Leonard Cohen. Human nature, says John. When you train mentally and physically to run a race and you cross the finish line as a winner, you drop your pace and jog on the lap of honour. You can't fool yourself. The race is not over. Absolutely. And then it's all about preparing for that big cup final that Patrick's talking about. And Dylan O'Donnell, apologies if I've already given you a shout out. I don't think I have. So afternoon to you as well. Thanks for joining the show. Thanks everybody for getting involved. We're 600 strong on the live stream. And I really am looking forward to hearing your thoughts on Ange Postecoglou's press conference yesterday, the game tonight, and obviously looking forward to Aberdeen and then the Scottish Cup final. And then the pre-season, and we're talking pre-season whereby there could be a lot of incomings and outgoings, Lawrence. And I think that this is a big thing when you look at our playing squad. I always remember, in previous seasons, you'd be looking at that home programme, and our playing squad sometimes look like twice as big as the visiting team. I think we've been a lot kind of leaner under Ange. There hasn't been a massive playing squad, but a big part of that is, you've got a dozen players out on loan. And I think that there's a lot of business to be done to free up those wages. But also, we're going to be getting quite a lot of cash coming in should the likes of Tierney move on, should the likes of Frimpong move on. We'll already have a budget, and potentially 1 or 2 bodies might be out the door as well. So we could be playing with quite a big bounty this summer.
Yeah, I'd expect so. And it's champions with automatic entry into the Champions League. We've got that cash coming in. But, 12 players out on loan, you'd want to move on a lot of them. I think Ayeti's picked up an injury. Hopefully it's not too serious. Hopefully we can still move them on. But I think, for the majority of those, all bar 1 or 2, Ange has already decided, your future's not at Celtic. So it is really just about getting something back for them, freeing up some space. More interested in who's going to come in though. Obviously, Joe Hart's getting on. But maybe showed we're maybe not as strong at centre half as we thought we were. So it'll be interesting to see what nuggets Ange can find this summer. I know there's been some clubs, players, an exodus, players leaving for free. I don't think any of them would improve our squad.
That's a positive, though, isn't it? I mean, that's part of the Beale revolution.
It's certainly a revolution. To let that amount of assets walk away for free in a one season. I've not really seen that approach from a football club, but what do I know? I mean, they ran the last one so successfully. Who am I to stop them with this kind of financial planning?
But how can you turn that into a positive? It's incredible, and that's why we're talking about the fact that Ange has been asked these questions. It's not a positive. It can't be looked upon as a positive. But if they want to create that and delude themselves, then that's fine because it makes us even stronger. Danielle, I'm bringing you in here as well. Let me know what your thoughts are, Danielle, on the Joe Hart situation. We've been talking about Joe Hart over the last few weeks. It started off, I think, 2 weeks ago where I was singing his praises. I was asked to give my view on Joe Hart. I was going on about how much of an impact he's made at Celtic. And I think that over the last few weeks, I've been looking at not just Joe, but the goalkeeper situation and what we should be doing in the summer. And I've made my point pretty clear. I do think we need to bring in another goalie. Whether or not he displaces Joe Hart immediately, I don't know. But I do think he needs a challenge. Ange made an excellent point, says Danielle, yesterday. If Kobayashi gets injured, then we would need Iwata at centre-back. So he tried it against St Mirren to let Iwata and Starfelt get used to each other. And I think that's maybe why, the flip side of that, Patrick, could well be Iwata and Kobayashi. I know that Iwata had played centre-half over in Japan. He looks a much inferior player to me than he does in midfield because I think he's brilliant in midfield. I really, I've been really impressed with him when he's played in the midfield position. But let's talk fullbacks. So over the last few weeks, Patrick, we've seen obviously Ralston coming in for Johnston. We've then seen Johnston back in training. And in the left-back position, we've seen run-outs for Bernabe and Taylor. What do we do tonight? And when you look at the situation with Johnston, as much of a warrior as he is, I'm always reluctant also to bring in a player that's not 100% fit, especially for a big game like the Cup final.
Yeah, but the sounds of things, yesterday was his first training session back. I think Ange was, he all but sort of ruled him out of tonight's game. So I think, maybe the weekend is where we might see him come back in, even if it's, off the bench or something. But, hopefully he should be absolutely fine for the Cup final. A week and a half, 11, 12 days or so, I think, with it being a Cup final last game of the season, I think you can take that risk. And as I say, maybe even see him at the weekend, but not tonight. But I'll be honest, we've all came round on Ralston the last 2 years. He totally turned his career around. The minute that Ange walked in the door, but I've been really unimpressed. Over the last couple of weeks when he's been deputising for Johnson, I think he's been quite poor. Not a disaster by any means. One or two. The first goal for St Mirren at the weekend there was pretty poor, and it's sort of joint responsibility between him and Kobayashi not communicating. Apart from that, there's been no standout errors, but I think just, very poor going forward. He's obviously still got his physicality about him, so defending, he's still quite solid, but I'm not sure. I think we could get better. It might not be top priority, but I think he's definitely been suffering from a dip in form the last couple of months. Taylor, he's not played badly. I thought he had a poor game at the weekend, but he was he's been sensational the past 12, 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
Last couple of games, I think just like the whole squad really just been a bit off it, and obviously Bernabe had a bad game at Ibrox as well. So I've been saying, ever since that 3-0 defeat, it has been a bit of a wake up call. Maybe not for Ange. He said that in the presser yesterday that he knows what his players are capable of. He sees them every day. It's not a wake up call at all. But I think maybe a few of the fans, I include myself in that, absolutely. We sort of get a bit carried away going on about how strong the bench is, how strong the squad is, and maybe it's not as strong as what we thought it was. Even guys like Abada played at Ibrox and, has one chance, could have done better, didn't make much of an impact. I think it is a bit of a reality check, and just in time as well for the summer, because there's definitely a lot of areas where we can look to improve.
See, the thing, Patrick, right, when we win the treble under Martin O'Neill, What do you remember about that season? Well, you don't remember the couple of games in the league that we lost after we wrapped the title up. You don't remember them, right? It's a footnote in Celtic's history. You can go and check the wiki for the details, but you certainly don't. They're not anything they're not go-to games. And we go out and we beat Dunfermline in the Scottish Cup final. So it's quite similar to that, Lawrence. But I think what Patrick's saying about Ralston is true. I mean, we have seen his evolution as a Celtic player. I remember seeing his debut. In actual fact, he was only 17. Obviously, Acsom wasn't around back then because, that was maybe about 7 years ago he made his debut now. And although we are about to celebrate our 6th birthday next month, incidentally, Acsom, and we've seen Ralston being written off, getting thrown in for the odd game here and there. He's been out the team for 18 months before eventually coming back for one of those games post the bye. I think it was against Livingston at home when Gavin Strachan was in charge. Remember that? Bizarre days. But then Ange has shown a bit of belief in him. And I think he's repaid that. And he's become a bit of a cult hero, I think, certainly amongst the Acsom team as well. But I remember last season he'd been out for a wee while. And when he came back in for Park, he was rusty and he was kind of performing the way that he's performing now. And I just don't know if it takes a wee while for these players to come back to full fitness. And although I know things have changed, Lawrence, I don't know if you remember the conversation we had with George Conley when we were doing one of our kind of signing events with him. He used to speak about half a dozen games was the magic number. It was like, if you've been out injured, it takes you 6 games to get right back to your peak performance. So you're match fit, you can play the game, but you're not at your peak. And he reckoned back then it was about 6 games. I don't know if it's as many as that with Ange's team, but it certainly is a bedding in period to get back up to your peak fitness. And I think that's what Tony's suffering from at the moment.
Yeah, definitely there's a bedding in piece. Frank McGarvey used to say if he was out for a week, it'd take him 2 weeks to get back. Right on, out for 2, it'd take him 4. What
was Frank's pre-match meal though, Lawrence?
I'm not too sure,
That was when they used to have steak and chips and all that before a game.
On the bus about looking out the window at cows and envying their lifestyle. But no, I think maybe Ralston's suffering from the fact that the gap between him and AJ is now bigger than the gap between him and Juranovic was. I think AJ is quite a big upgrade in Juranovic, and it shows more now when Ralston comes in. Because I think it was a lot closer to the previous first choice right back. I think, there's a bit of rust there. What does the future hold for Tony? He's not first choice. So How do you improve your squad? It's upgrade your second choice players. So as your first choice becomes second choice, you get a new first choice. Would definitely improve things. So I'm not too sure what the future is going to hold for Tony, but he's been a brilliant servant and proved everyone wrong, at the club. So he's been cracking for Celtic. It's something we may be looking to change in the summer. Who knows?
You think? The one aspect.
How do you improve your squad, mate? And it is improving. If you've got somebody better than AJ and he dropped down to your second choice, there's no doubt that that's improved. You've got to improve your weakest in those 2 positions. Where the squad is just now, I don't think we should be buying second choice players. It's first choice. And when you look at, Joe Hart, great servant he's been to us, but would you take a young Arthur Boric just now like he was when we got him, or a Fraser Foster when we got him over on loan first time round? And I'd say, I'd take both of them over Hart just now. So I think it's buying players for the first team, and by the nature of that pushes someone out yet in the second place, which means what you do with your second place guy, you may have to move him on.
The one thing I would say in Tony's defence, when you're talking about comparing him to Johnston, I'd be interested to hear what you think about this, both Patrick, Lawrence and anyone else tuning in the comments section. I think Ralston is still a better crosser of the ball. I think he's still better at the distribution element of the game. I see so many times Ralston hitting that byline and getting up, you're fizzing a ball over. He's had a number of assists. I think that's one element of his game. I'll ask you first, Patrick, that Ralston still actually has over Johnson.
I'll be honest, it's quite close. I've quite liked Johnson's delivery recently, since he's came in, but I wouldn't dare slag Ralston off, or, maybe I should actually, because the last time I said he was a bad crosser of the ball, he put one right on Kyogo's head to open the scoring earlier in the season. So, he likes to prove me wrong when I slag his crossing. So, definitely. He's a terrible crosser of the ball. So, no, I'll need to go AJ.
Colin Watt used to love our former right back in Maurice Bower, and I always thought he was good at distribution. Somebody that didn't really like crosses, Lawrence, was a goalkeeper in our era, Pat Bonner, whose birthday it is today. Do you know what age Pat is?
Pat, so about 78, he was 18, wasn't he? So around 17, 18 and 78. So I'm going to go, that's 22, that's 43.
I'll just bring up some comments.
60.
63 today, Pat Bonner. 63.
Right.
And he has made it, of course, into the top appearance list in terms of Celtic players of the past. He was around for absolute forever. He was
Remember, we were
last signing.
Italia 90, we were going to free him. Or he was out of contract, and then he had a great Italia.
It was USA 94.
Was it USA 94?
He was the only player, Lawrence, in the entire World Cup who didn't have a club. He'd actually been freed, and it came up when his name came up on the screens, unattached. And he was meant to be going to Kelly, whose manager at the time was Tommy Burns.
Yep.
Lou McCarry was at the World Cup, even though Fergus told him not to go. So he went anyway. McCann gets rid of him. Burns comes to Celtic. Burns gives Pat Bonner a new deal. Brilliant. Because the other player was Charlie Nicholas. He was freed as well, and Tommy brought him back for the experience. So, and Bonner ended up playing in the 95 Cup final after being freed about a year and a half before that. Brilliant. So there you go. Pat Bonner, 63. What was your big memories of him?
He was just the keeper that I kind of grew up with. It was him in Latchford to start with, and you're aware he's Steen's last signing. It wasn't the best at crosses, but he just seemed to be another present in that team. Through the age, didn't he? He just seemed to always be there, and
he was always there.
Trying to replace him, you had guys like Ian Andrews who came in. Actually, Alan McKnight was okay for a small period as backup keeper, wasn't he?
He was good, but he needed games. I remember we signed Alan McKnight and Anton Rogan. They both came over from Distillery in the north of Ireland. You remember the pair of them came over. I think we probably paid about 20 grand for each of them. And both of them ended up full internationals. McKnight was maybe a surprise inclusion in the 88 Cup final, you'll remember.
Yep.
And that brilliant yellow goalie top. But he ended up...
Was that yellow with green pads, emerald green pads?
Whatever happened to the pads on goalie tops, Lawrence? Remember the elbow pads and the shoulder pads?
Just maybe getting tougher these days. They don't need the protection. I don't know.
Aerodynamic. Honestly, Patrick, these things were heavy as anything. Big proper Alan Rough goalie tops. But Alan McKnight wanted game time.
For his Rough, actually. He came in for a bit as well.
He did.
Hamish McAlpine.
Hamish McAlpine played 2 games for Celtic. Yeah. There you go. In the pre-season.
I don't know was ever present. All these keepers were in as well, I suppose.
They were. They came and went. There's a great picture, though, and it's a training image in the early 90s. We done a blog yesterday. It was interesting looking through some of the research when I was editing it. And it was about, a number of players who got away. And there's a great picture in the early 90s, and it's Pat Bonner. They're at Barrafield, right? So they're caked in muck. Now, what was the name? What was the name of the goalkeeper coach? Who was the goalie coach, though? Joe Corrigan. Joe Corrigan was the goalie
coach, yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, Joe Corrigan. Brad Fiedel, Shea Given. Gordon Marshall.
Yep. Pat Bonner. And I think Stuart Kerr.
Stuart Kerr, yeah.
Aye.
We kept 3 of those.
They kept 3 of them. One of them wasn't Brad Friedel, who ended up playing until he was about 45 at the top level. And one of them wasn't Shea Given, of course, who went on to great things as well. But there you go. But, check out the blog. Acsom.net is going to be updated every single day. We're going to have blogs. And the one I was looking at yesterday, which I found really interesting, Patrick, how do you replace Henrik Larsson? So, but we're talking about that season where we lost a couple of league games. That's the season we're talking about. You're going into, you're going to go and play Dunfermline Athletic in the Scottish Cup final. You know that Larsson's leaving. And you think, how do you replace this guy, right? And at that point, if I remember correctly, Barcelona hadn't been quoted. That happened after, the cup final and all that. I might be wrong on that one. And then this story breaks that we're trying to sign Rivaldo. We're trying to sign Rivaldo, who's a free agent at this point. And O'Neill, as O'Neill does, he offers him a trial. So it would have been Rivaldo under the name trialist for Celtic, which is tremendous in itself. And we asked, you'll remember, we asked O'Neill about that, and we asked him about Ivan De La Pena, who was over as
Yes,
a
he was
trialist.
rumoured as well at the time, yeah.
He played 2 games, 2 bounce games against Livy and Dundee. When I asked Martin O'Neill, I can't even remember having him over. And I just thought superb. So check out the blog. We ended up, of course, with wee Janino, but we were in the hunt for 3 different Brazilians. But there you go. We've gone on a wee tangent there. Pat Bonner, that would have been before your time, Patrick, I'm guessing.
Aye, long before.
You'll just remember him as a pundit.
Kadu
I know, I'm
Rovers,
always
was
keeping
that?
my mind. Say that again?
Kadu Rovers we signed him from?
TG Rovers, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. 70th
I
of
think
March.
Sean Fallon's dad had something to do with the transfer. Sean
Right.
Fallon's dad, who was actually called John Fallon, no relation to the Lisbon Lion.
Big John.
He
The original
was
Holy Goalie.
the original Holy Goalie. So Sean Fallon's dad, I think, got Pat Bonner over. He was homesick. He played his debut game. He had an absolute nightmare against Motherwell. It looked as though he was going back over to Ireland. And then, of course, he was here for about 20 years. A massive hero in Ireland as well, obviously. But another player I wanted to talk about before we get back into tonight's lineup, we've only got 20 minutes left, Tommy Rogic. Tommy Rogic has been freed by West Bromwich Albion, and he's a player, it's kind of just not worked out for him after Celtic. You know, it was maybe quite a surprise that he was allowed to leave when he was, Patrick. It was a bold move, I think, from Ange at the time. We probably could have kept him. And they had an understanding through the international career pre-Celtic for Ange of what Tom could do, but he's now without a club. Does that surprise you? Is it just been a bad decision by him?
Yeah, it was definitely a strange one at the time. You know, if you cast your mind back, we sort of relied on Rogic, Turnbull, and McGregor for the first half of Ange's first season, and we eventually get Hatate and Idaguchi in, and you feel there's you get your 3 week it's like COVID/winter break time, if you remember, just after Boxing Day, and you felt as if we're rested, we've got extra bodies in, we can sort of go again here. And you felt as if we were developing a top quality squad, and then all of a sudden we get rid of 2 midfielders at the end of the season in Beaton and Rogic, and you thought, well, we're going to end up short here again. Because it's not as if he was in and out the squad. He's a regular starter last season, as far as I can remember. Played a lot of games. And Ange finally got him playing 90 minutes. He used to get hooked after 60 under, Dial and Rogers, and never wasn't really part of the squad under Lennon. But, Ange got him 90 minutes. I mean, he had to play 90 minutes the way the first half of the first season panned out. And it was a bit of a shock, and it was obviously an emotional day at Parkhead when he was substituted, and it was going to be his final game. And it's I compare it to Samaras solely because of West Brom. Samaras there for 7-8 years, released. His time has came to a natural end. He's about 30, goes to West Brom. It doesn't really happen, and I think it's such a strange one because he's so missed by us, but because of his fitness levels and because he's maybe a bit slow, it's hard to know where he fits in elsewhere in world football.
Yeah.
He can be slow. He can be a 60-minute player in Scotland playing for Celtic, but he can't really do that in the English game because it's so fast paced, and you can go up and down, and the financial risk there is just off the charts. So players like that, I think, always struggle to find another club. Maybe needs to drop a level. Maybe Spanish or the German league. Maybe one of those lower league teams. I'm not sure, but on his day, just an absolutely magical player and fantastic servant for Celtic. Deeply missed, but not the worst time to move on. I think he was 29 or 30 when he left, so these things come to a natural end. But he'll be remembered fondly by us, and good luck to him for the rest of his career.
Yeah, definitely. There was talk before he went down to England about him going to Qatar. In fact, whilst he was at Celtic, there was that deal lined up. I think maybe his partner didn't fancy it at the last minute. It was certainly going to be a lucrative move for him. We wish him all the best, though, Lawrence. He gave us some great memories.
Listen, I think he had his best season under Ange. I think that was far and away his best season. Maybe not his best moment, scoring that goal in the cup final to seal another treble was. There's that many trebles, isn't there? But I think that was probably his best moment. But he obviously wanted to move on, and I think Jared spoke on here. It looked like he was lined up because Qatar was the season before, and then he stayed when Ange came in, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He was lined up for a return home, and it didn't work out, whatever, in Australia, and I think that's what left him with nowhere to go. I think he'd already, I think when someone decides they want to leave Celtic, that's it for Ange. You know what? You're out my plans, mate. I'm moving on. I'm building something here, and you've indicated you're not part of it. So yeah, absolutely loved him. Not least for his, maybe he's the first Australian to really put the press in a place. What you talking about? We've dominated for 10 years.
That word dominate gets thrown about quite a bit. And,
apparently if you won one league in 10 years, that's a dominant. It's just nuts, isn't it? But that was a great press conference from Big Rogic. So yeah, maybe it was. Who knows?
I know it was. We wish him all the very best. And another midfielder I want to talk about, and I don't know if we'll see him tonight. We've already, spoken about the possibility of a different partnership at centre half for the reasons that Ange explained yesterday. Is David Turnbull? So Patrick, you mentioned about the importance of Turnbull when Ange first came in, and I think right up to the semi-final against St Johnstone, wasn't it, where he gets injured? Or was it the final against Hibs?
I think it was the final.
The final.
Right.
And then after that, he's never really regained that regular position in Ange's team. He's a young player. I still reckon that in terms, if David Turnbull's at any other club in Scotland, you're looking at him, right? He's a talented boy. And actually at the weekend there against St Mirren, I think at half-time I says to Peter, this is kind of built for David Turnbull to come on, because sometimes where you can't break down a defence, you need that guy who can score from 25 yards. That's what he's good at. He's had his moments this season, but we've barely seen him recently. Do you see him getting a bit of a run out tonight? Because again, if there's any injuries, he's a player that we might have to call on, not always as a starter, but potentially from the bench. Do you think he'll get a run out tonight?
He certainly could do, yeah. He's a player I've always been a fan of. When we didn't sign him the first time round in 2019, I was quite disappointed. A few of my pals are Motherwell fans, and they said that his career was over and stuff like this. The injury was that bad. He's never going to be the same player. It took him a full season to get back. Came back, played a couple of good games. COVID hits, and then we go and sign him anyway, thankfully. And he doesn't really get in the team under Lennon for the first couple of months, and then the proverbial hits the fan during the lockdown season, where we end up 19 points behind in the space of about 4 weeks. And, he comes in, Sorrell comes in, and they're the bright sparks for a few months. And I think he won Player of the Year that year. And obviously, as you say, I think he started every competitive game under Ange that he could until he picks up that injury. I think he finished last season fairly strongly. I know he scored on Trophy Day last year. I don't know how much game time he got, but he was still in and around. But this season, it feels like he's been a bit distant. He's not got a lot of game time, and he's one of those guys where, a bit like Rogic, he's not the quickest player. The way that we want to play, you look at guys like O'Reilly, Hatate, quite quick pressing the ball, and especially Hatate, he's got that natural ability as well that Turnbull has. Eye for a pass and stuff. So when you've got guys like that ahead of you, it's very hard to break into the team. And he could be, I think he's sort of earmarked as one that could maybe go in the summer. It just seems like a sort of natural end, because it's so hard to see him playing again unless we lose a number of key players in midfield. And he's one, not to put him in the shop window, but if you want to give him a bit of game time, and if other clubs are maybe watching, see what he can do, and maybe get a fee for him. As you say, if he plays for any other team in Scotland, you're thinking, God, sign him, 2-3 million. You're looking at guys like Duke and Van Veen this season. You think maybe $1 million or $2 million, you can try and pick them up, see how they do. But Turnbull he was immense for Motherwell for 18 months before we signed him. And if it doesn't work out, I'll be quite disappointed. He's had a lot of special moments, but it just seems impossible to see him getting back in the first 11.
Yeah, this. I looked at Lawrence. You were part of the stream last season. I've just been looking for the game. It was when we beat Hearts 4-1. You, me, and Ewan Martin were in the studio. We covered the game. I don't know if you recall that. And I remember after it, we were talking about the plans for next season. Of course, you're looking ahead, what we're going to do next season. And Ewan, I don't know if he's tuning in. I've not seen him in the comments yet. Big shout out to Ewan Martin. Ewan actually said something, and he got a lot of flack for it at the time. And it was around Turnbull not being a feature this season. And when he said it, I don't know, you and I maybe even disagreed with him, but certainly a lot of the commenters disagreed with him. But it has come to fruition. We're at that point now, a year down the line, where you're looking at that player and you think he is a talent. He'll be looking at his international recognition that he's already got and hope that he can maybe be a regular, but he's never going to be a regular if he's not playing games. And he's also maybe looking at some of the players that he's played alongside who have gone elsewhere. And, if he doesn't have that game time, then he might be looking elsewhere. He might be a player, unfortunately, that we end up losing out on. Even though I really do value him and I rate him really highly. I think he can give us something at times that is required. But he doesn't want to be an impact sub, does he?
No, he's one of the... I suppose impact subs may be wrong. He's wanting to be one of that front six that's getting rotated, because we put on all 5 subs, but sometimes some weeks, or you maybe go a month without seeing him. That's not that. He's not part of the core squad that you expect to see every week on the park. That area of the pitch is maybe a bit like right back. I feel we could do with something different, an upgrade in the attacking midfield position. If that upgrade comes in, I'd expect it to come in as a first team starter. Where does that push David to? If he can start tonight, if he plays tonight and does well, maybe then gets another couple of games and does well, he might come back into Ange's plans. But I've got a feeling he might get squeezed out, and not to do with his lack of talent. He's definitely a talented boy, but it's just I'd like to see him bringing in a first team starter for the attacking midfield position. That's going to push him further down. He then needs to think of his own career, doesn't he? And what's going to happen. Because if he didn't get a lot of game time this season, and they're bringing in someone else that's would expect to start ahead of him, it would suggest he's probably going to get less next season. Yeah, maybe time to cash in on him. He's been decent for us. Has he been any more than decent? I'm not too sure. I don't think he's ever hit the levels of Hatate in terms of performance. He scored some cracking goals for us. I've never really seen him run a midfield for us, be absolutely the dominant player in that midfield. No, I'm not seeing that from him.
He's only 23. He's 23 years of age, and although he's played 35 games this season, a lot of the appearances have been off the bench. And I just think he's at that stage of his own career where he needs a lot more game time, because I think he could be that player, Lawrence, but he's not getting the game time to do it. Coming on with 16 minutes to go, expected maybe to pull a rabbit out the hat. So it will be interesting, but let's see if he is chosen to play tonight. Joseph McGonigal, afternoon tonight, normal service will resume. Love the way Ange deals with them, talking, of course, about the media when he's asked daft questions. Tam Mack, see Tom Rogic has left West Brom. Sad it's not worked out for him. Absolutely, he left us with some phenomenal memories. And Joseph's back in. Please hit like to get Acsom into the algorithm. Get it to people who don't know about it. And that's true, because obviously we've got a really loyal audience, and I thank every single one of you for getting involved. But it's nice to spread the word, and obviously we're doing that through the blog now as well, and we're doing it through live events. There are now 7 tickets available for Jackie McNamara on Friday night. If you want to come along, you can buy one of those tickets. There might be 1 or 2 VIPs still available. In the link underneath this video, come along and speak to wee Jackie McNamara at Gracie's in Glasgow. Really looking forward to that. The tickets have started flying again this week. I think it must be pay week or something. People are getting their wages in, and they want to come along and see a wee bit of live action.
The bets came in, mate. Maybe
Which
some
one?
people have bet on, the Toe Cup. Maybe some.
Oh yes,
or the bragging rights trophy. They've done a double when I was losing it, and they've got some money in.
What do we make then? Because we've spoken quite a bit about the media, and I said at the top of the show, media is media. I'm not talking mainstream. I'm not talking alternative. There's good and bad. But there was mention. Callum McGregor has spoken about his aspirations for Celtic in European football. He's spoken about the fact that he believes that under Ange Postecoglou he can actually meet those ambitions at Celtic, which is phenomenal for a player like Callum, because it looks as though he's going to end his career at Celtic. Lawrence, he's going to go down as one of the greats. He's been spoken about in the last week by former manager Neil Lennon as being a potential manager at Celtic. Someone who might beat Bobby Lennox's honours record. 26 medals, I think, Bobby won at Celtic. Yeah. And Callum's got 19 going on 20. The appearance record, all this kind of stuff could be broken by Callum McGregor. And I love to see it. Modern day icon, and maybe looked back on as a legend. A lot of people don't like calling current players legends, but he's been talking about his European aspirations, Lawrence. And he was shot down in the press, not surprisingly. But in terms of European aspirations, and you look at what Man City did to Real Madrid, for example, and what Real Madrid did to us. And I know we're not the finished article. What are our European aspirations? Is it a European final within the Tier 2 or Tier 3 tournament? Is that what we aspire to at the moment?
So I think you've got to get in with a few plans. If we're in the Champions League, I think Ange is qualified from the group stages. If we don't, then it's Plan B. Then it's go as far as you can in that competition. I mean, it's achievable. You only look across the city. Look what they done. They got to a European final. They had there was a superstars penalty kick away from winning it. So we know teams smaller than us can achieve that. So with smaller budgets than us. So there's no reason why we can't achieve it. So I think it's realistic for us to have two plans. I think Ange will say, well, look, if we're in that Champions League group, we want to qualify. If we don't qualify, the next tournament again, we want to have an eye to winning it. I just talk about his philosophy all the time, because into every game he puts a team on the park that he thinks can win. It's attacking football, and he thinks that's the best way of playing football. Although, when he first came, the Scottish media told him he didn't know what he was talking about. Even though, when you think about it, he had 23 years as a winning coach, developing his philosophy. The Scottish media still said he didn't know what he's talking about. Some people refer to him as lucky, but Karl Marx definitely bought into it. And if he's believing it, he's worked under a few decent managers, Callum. If he's got players believing that they can achieve something in Europe, that's the first stage, isn't it?
That's it. That's the mentality. Yeah, absolutely. That's the mentality, Lawrence. And it's like, as soon as he says it, there is this other side of that mentality, Patrick, that says, no, you can't do that. How dare you have an aspiration beyond winning something in Scotland? You can't do anything in Europe. And I think that when we use the example, and Ange actually brought it up yesterday talking about the challenge. Well, the challenge we had this year was from a team who had won the Scottish Cup last season and who had got into a European final. Is that not a challenge? And that challenge has been weakened, considerably by the loss of 5 players. So when you look at what's happened previously in Scottish football in Europe, Patrick, and then you look at the situation that Ange has been in last season mainly, but also this season with regards where he's carrying a lot of players he didn't bring to the club. They're out on loan. He wants to get rid of them. And I've always said, you transfer that, all those wages and any money you can get in from them, and you put it into a pot and you bring in some real quality. So it's not about having this incredible pool of players. It's about having the quality of 18 or 19 players. One drops out, the one that goes in, there's no drop in tempo or quality. And I think we can get to that. And if you get to that stage, then you're looking at a completely different beast in Europe. You imagine the quality of a Jota and Carter Vickers coming again this summer, or the quality of a Tati and Kyogo coming this summer, and you add that to what we've already got, then that's going to benefit you in Europe. I don't see it as being an impossible pipe dream.
No, not at all. Last season showed that. I mean, you've got to listen. That was a team that got incredibly lucky. I mean, they really shouldn't have beat Dortmund or Leipzig in that run to the final, and eventually their luck ran out. Thank goodness. But it is possible with a bit of luck. I think it was. There's maybe 2 games out of the 8 knockout games that they played that they get lucky. So it shows that if you perform at your best, you only need a bit of luck and you can go quite far. I discovered the other day the new Champions League format, and I'm not sure, how well everyone's looked into this, because it's certainly something that I never knew up until a couple of days ago. There's not going to be any drop down from the group phase or under the new format. So this next season is the last chance to drop down into the Europa League. So in future, if we want to play Europa League football, it'll have to be, either finishing second or losing a qualifier or something like that. So we're probably going to be in the Champions League group stages for quite a few years in a row, as long as we continue to win the league. But apart from next season, we might not be in the Europa League for a long, long time. So it would be great to finish first or second in a Champions League group. I think it's, the way pot 1 and 2 look at the moment, you'd have to get the luck of the draw for that to be viable. I think third is where we should be aiming for, and trying to go as far as you can in the Europa League, because the finals in Dublin next year, and wouldn't that be quite romantic?
Imagine that.
To win the Europa League in Dublin, to potentially become the most successful team in Scotland in terms of trophies won. I think that'd be quite sweet. I've always said that we are more than capable of competing in the Europa League if we're at our best. I personally don't think in the 9 or 10 years I've had a season ticket, we've had a better team. It might be naive, or I might be sort of living in the moment a bit to say that this team's better than Rogers' Invincibles, but I think they are. I think the way that we play football, we look unstoppable at times, and I don't think we've had a better chance since Martin O'Neill to try and do something in Europe. So I really hope we do it next season, because these chances don't come around every so often.
I hope we do, and I hope that it's important to keep talking about it, not just as fans, but bringing it up in terms of Callum McGregor talking about it. If he says something, it's going to be noticed. He spoke about wanting to draw Real Madrid this season. If you look back on the pre-draw interviews, he wanted Real Madrid, and that's because he just wanted to test himself at that level. He wanted Celtic to test ourselves at that level, and the important reason, I think, the factor that you continually go on about it is, we had a wee chat about the Rivaldo thing before. What actually happened was, we were in a situation there where O'Neill was no longer being backed to the same kind of level as he had been up to that point. And Rivaldo really probably wasn't the answer. It was a marquee signing. But he had been offered 40 grand a week by Bolton to sign for Bolton. So that's the kind of figures we were talking about for these players. We then had a look at and had on trial Amoroso, who, had been a top goal scorer for Borussia Dortmund. He'd won the Bundesliga at Borussia Dortmund, and he had cost in the region of 55 million euros over 2 transfers. He was going to be big, big money. And why didn't we take him on? Yeah, there was an injury concern about his knee. But what it was is, we no longer wanted to, pump that kind of money into O'Neill's squad. And because we realised that in terms of the financials, Lawrence, it wasn't working in the balance sheet. But the way that we've done this is slightly different. And the way that we're doing, the player recruitment, so that we can sell at a profit, even if it's a Giakoumakis, where you're bringing him in slightly older, 27, we're still turning a profit on him. We're still turning a profit on Juranovic. And if we continue to do that over a period of 2 or 3 seasons, and we get that quality every transfer window, then you build a team who are capable of competing at a higher level. I truly believe that. And it's great to hear Callum McGregor, our esteemed captain, talking about it. Before we go, I want to get a few more comments coming up. Tim Anon, who does Turnbull replace? He's not better than the current starters. I don't disagree with that. I do think, though, that he's a player we should keep. Daniel Brown, best to keep Turnbull and get rid of Moy, reckons Daniel. Moy's time will come to a natural end, I think, through age. And Kaiser, welcome back to the show. Kaiser, I will miss the Turnbull tornado. He just turns in wee circles. He's very good at that. Remember, McStay done it in the New Year Derby in the centenary season.
Plays it down the right-hand side.
Chris Morris. Oh, phenomenal. And you've got Andy Walker at the back post, but it doesn't make it that far because McAvenny knocks it away. Paul McLean, is a performance Celtic need tonight, not just a win. It would be nice to get that performance. And Chill Pill, showing Ange with his guns out, 23, and we are talking about him moving on. That's just lunacy.
I think it's the length of his contract, but we touched on things, what we could win and a bit of luck. The girls in green, mate, how unlucky.
I know. It was heartbreaking to see that. It really was heartbreaking. And of course, Natasha interviewed Fran Alonso the day after the game. That's also up on the blog, and he was gutted.
The day after it, mate. Jeez.
Oh, he was gutted.
It really, when the cheer, in the stadium, you're aware it's 0 each, and then 6 scoring, and you hear it's just absolutely.
It was sickening.
I mean that Caitlin Hayes goal getting rolled off against Rangers now really has come back to haunt us, hasn't it? Because that was 2 points of a swing. But big shout out to Christina, who I met in Chapman's after the St Mirren game, the day before, obviously the girls in green, who always watches the shows, and to a couple of people down from Oban for the girls in green as well, who are avid followers of Acsom.
Nice one, superb. Great to make your acquaintance. Hopefully we see you at a future game or event. If you want to come along and see Acsom Friday night with Jackie, feel free to do so. A few tickets available, single figures now underneath the stream. It's always an absolute pleasure to be on the show, regardless of who comes to join me. But thanks everybody for tuning in again, 700 strong in the live stream. It really is going to strength, and it's all thanks to you guys. Come back tonight, half an hour before kickoff. We'll be covering the Hibs game. Hopefully we do get that performance and we do get the result as well. All that's left for me to say, Lawrence Conley and Patrick McGill, thanks for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.